so excited to welcome John Francis on the stage.
It's graduation time again, and you can be sure that there will be many speeches urging young people to go out there and change the world. And those same young people will be wondering how. Well, tonight we have the story of one man who set about changing the world by first changing himself. Our story begins on a misty night in 1971 when two oil tankers collide beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, spilling more than 500,000 gallons of crude into the bay. At that time, John Francis was just another hippie living in West Marin County. But when he saw the oozing sludge and dying birds, he wanted to protest in a way that others thought was crazy. Francis wanted to stop riding in cars.
And I found myself on the road walking, and I said, well, I'm already walking here. I'm just going to keep walking.
With his banjo as his companion, John Francis challenged anyone who would listen to believe in his mission.
I found myself arguing with my friends if one person could make a difference by not riding in an automobile.
So he had another idea. To stop the arguments, he would simply stop talking.
I decided that I would stop speaking just for one day to give my community a gift of my silence, because John was a big talker.
This is Francis back then. He was 27 years old on the day he stopped talking in order to truly listen. That day's silence lasted 17 years.
When I first stopped speaking, I could hear all the conversations pretty much that I ever had. After about a month of not speaking, they soon went away.
Without the conversations, John had only to listen to himself, and what he heard disturbed him. He realized that he had been living a lie about who he was as a black man in a white world.
What I saw in the media was that I could be a buffoon, or I could be a criminal, but could I be the person I am right now? And I didn't see that person. It took me to just stop talking until I said, oh my God, there you are. and then I just rediscovered who I was, and I didn't need to lie anymore. Well, I couldn't lie because I didn't talk. I mean, I just couldn't do it.
Francis went from being this know-it-all to someone who wanted to know more. So he began a pilgrimage that left his footprints across the country.
There's our start.
John Francis.
We'll make a movie.
Linda Lindell.
You haven't taken a ride, you walked all the way, huh?
I saw America. I heard America speak to me. And I was very taken by what my experience was.
What Francis didn't know at that time was that he was ahead of his time, on the forefront of what would become a movement, environmentalism. When he found that Southern Oregon University offered a new course in environmental studies, he walked to Ashland and enrolled. He then walked to Missoula, Montana to get a master's degree, eventually ending up at the University of Wisconsin to get his PhD. Along the way, he also taught a discussion class. Remember, all without speaking.
13 years ago.
Sometimes I would make these signs like so. My class would sit around, they go, what's he saying? What's he saying? I don't know, I think he's talking about clear cutting. No, that's not clear cutting. He was using a handsaw, and he wouldn't clear cut with a, you can clear cut with a handsaw. I think he's talking about selective forestry. And I would just kind of back out, because this is a discussion class, and let the discussion go on.
And Francis's education was evolving as well.
I thought environment was about human-made ugliness and pollution and endangered species. I started to realize that environment was really much more than that it involved, human rights and civil rights and economic equity and how we treat each other when we meet each other.
All along his journey from West Coast to East, the man who walked and didn't talk was being heard. In the 22 years he spent trekking across America, the once counterculture concept of environmentalism had become mainstream. By the time he arrived in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Coast Guard invited him to write pollution regulations for the nation's waterways, and the United Nations appointed him environmental ambassador.
I couldn't have dreamed that up. I couldn't have seen it. When people said, you know, one person can't make a difference, I have to say there were doubts sometimes, you know, as I'm walking and I am alone and I am just a black man with a banjo walking across America. I think we just make that commitment to make the journey. And once we commit ourselves to doing it, we change. We change ourselves from just sitting on the fence thinking about it to actually jumping in the field and making a mad dash or a slow walk. And I think that's our journey. That's all of our journeys. I think each one of us has that journey, that potential in ourselves to do that.
Well, thank you for being here. and I always start to speak with some music because that, you know, gets the blood moving and kind of connects us all. And when I started speaking after 17 years of not speaking, those are the first words that I said, thank you for being here. And I said them in Washington, D.C. on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. And I said those because I realized after not speaking for 17 years the importance of being a listener. So I was thanking all the people who came to hear me speak in Washington on that day. Included my mother and my father and my family, my brothers, and National Geographic came and Washington Post, and everybody came to hear me say my first words. And thank you for being here. My mom, she jumped up out of her chair and she said, hallelujah, John is talking. You know, after 17 years. And my dad, he said, that's one. And he said that's one because whenever I graduated college, he would come and find me to see me graduate. And he would always say, "What are you going to do with this bachelor's degree if you don't ride in cars and talk? What are you going to do with this master's degree if you don't ride in cars and talk?" I was getting my PhD at Wisconsin. My dad shows up at Madison, and he says, "You know, my sister said I should leave you alone because you seem to be doing so much better when you're not saying anything." "But what are you going to do with a PhD if you don't ride in cars and talk?" And I would always hunch my shoulder, grab my banjo, put my backpack on, and go to the next place. Well, that was then. When I was in Wisconsin, something happened. I was studying oil spills, and I was writing regulations. I was writing, I guess not regulations at that point, but I was writing a database because I wanted to write on the laws of oil spills in the marine environment, the cost and conventions of oil spills in the marine environment in the United States and Caribbean. Someone told me I should pick a warm place to study, to do my research, like the Caribbean. I said, okay. But something happened. My friends, they said, "You know, John, you're not going to get a job studying oil spills. You know, nobody's interested in oil spills." But that was before Exxon Valdez happened. So in March of 1989, Exxon Valdez brought oil and marine pollution to the attention of all the people in the United States. And everybody was interested in oil spills. And they even made an Oil Pollution Act of 1990 to have oil spill regulations written for the United States because we didn't have very many. And they weren't very effective. And so while I was at Madison, the Coast Guard called. "Yes, we'd like to speak to John Francis. We hear he's studying oil spills." Yes. He doesn't speak? "Oh, well, we want him to come to Washington to help us write the..." He walks everywhere. "Do you have any normal people at your university?" And they did speak to my major professor, who kind of explained everything for him, and so that was that. I walked to the East Coast. I started speaking. My dissertation was defended over the telephone because I did my research. And I don't know if my research assistant is here, Sarah Yurkovich. Ah, she is. Thank you. You know, she lives in Buffalo. She wanted to come and hear me speak. I said I was going to mention her name. And so I finished my dissertation and got my PhD. And I didn't know what I was going to do until the Coast Guard called again. But this time I could speak. And I said, "Yes, it's me, John Francis." Right. They said, "Listen, we want you to come to Washington to help us write these regulations." I'm up in Vermont right now. They said, "Well, I'll tell you what, we can send you a plane ticket and you can fly down here." I don't actually fly in planes. "That's okay, Dr. Francis. You can take a train and we'll reimburse you." And all the little dollar bill signs that I had seen, getting my first job after getting my PhD, just kind of disappeared, and I said, "I don't ride in trains either." "Dr. Francis, you don't ride in cars either, do you?" "No, I don't. We heard something about that. We'll get back to you." So I thought that would be the end of that, because how can you work for the federal government if you don't ride in cars and planes and all that other stuff, right? Oh, here they are again. What? How can I get there? I can ride a bicycle. Yeah, about 2 months. They said, Dr. Francis, we'll be waiting. And so I called my dad up right away. I said, Dad, I got a job. He said, what kind of job? I got a job with the Coast Guard. Can you believe it? He says, what Coast Guard? The U.S. Coast Guard. He says, yeah, but do they know who you are? I think so. Well, who do they think you are? I don't know, Dr. Francis. I think that was the first time I used Dr. Francis to my dad, and he says, oh my, the world has certainly changed. The world has certainly changed, and it had. Because when I started walking, when I gave up riding in cars, I was, Julie, I hear you. Because I was one of those people that was suffering. I was the one of those people that was in pain, and I was depressed because of what was going on, and I didn't know what to do except to make that step. I didn't have any degrees. I was a college dropout. And so just starting to walk, just getting out in nature, was just a great thing for me. And then on my 27th birthday, when I shut up, it was even better. Because I learned the value of listening. I was such a talker. But learning that I hadn't been listening and that I had stopped learning, that's so important, to listen to each other. And I hear that and see that in this community that we're in. I love the president of Fredonia. He says, I feel so welcome. I feel so comfortable being here with people who I know feel the same way that I do. And we're all different, but we all have the same thing in common. And so I walked across the United States, and I said goodbye to the Coast Guard, and I sailed down through the Caribbean to South America. And then I started walking through South America, through Venezuela, into Brazil, into Argentina. And when I got to Brazil, something happened. Well, actually, it happened before, but when I got to Brazil, I decided that I was going to start using motorized vehicles because I had left my parents and I had thought I would never see them again. The thing about not speaking was that it was a living, breathing decision. Every year I asked myself, was this still appropriate? And every year, for 16 years, it came back, yep, do it another year. On the 17th year, I said, I think I have something to say. And so I started speaking. I never afforded myself that opportunity when it came to riding motorized vehicles. And so it felt like a prison. And so when I passed the prison in Venezuela, El Dorado, I had this epiphany that I was in prison. It was a prison of my own making, and something had become a prison that I had chosen. And so I had to let myself out. And I decided I was going to walk as far as Brazil, and then I was going to turn back around, get in a car, get in a plane, and fly home for Christmas. Well, I called my parents up and I said, are you guys going to be home for Christmas? And they said, oh yeah, we're going to be home. And I said, oh, well, my friend Fouad is going to come and visit. Now, Fouad is my friend from Wisconsin as well. He's a Muslim, isn't he, John? I said, well, yeah, but he's been to the house. You know him, right? I said, yeah. Does he come in on Christmas? I said, you know Fouad. So they said, oh, we'll go pick him up at the airport. I said, no. He'll get to the house. He knows what. Christmas Eve shows up. I knock on the door of my parents' home in Cape May, New Jersey. My dad comes to the door. He opens the door, he looks at me, and he goes, this is the happiest Christmas of my life. That's 2. My mother's upstairs. She says, John, is Fouad here? Yes, he's here. He's here. Go up and visit your mom now. So I go upstairs, and my mother looks at me. Now, Fouad is kind of a short fellow. And she looks at me and she says, Fouad, it's so good to see you. Thank you for coming to visit. And she looked a little more and she says, you know, Fouad, you look a lot like our son, Johnny. Oh no, you are our son, Johnny. And she started crying, and I thought, well, I got to do this another 22 years in order to get that out of her again. But anyway, I went back to South America and continued my walk. But I heard something when I got to Brazil that was really intriguing. It was this program called Adopt a Pixel. Adopt a Pixel. It was something, I don't know, the kids were part of it. And they were doing environmental monitoring. So on my next trip back to the United States, I stopped in Washington, D.C., and I went to NASA. And I said, do you know anything about Adopt a Pixel? And they said, oh yeah, that's that program over at the White House now. They changed it, it's the GLOBE program. But isn't Adopt a Pixel really sexy? So I went over to the White House and there was the GLOBE program. It's a GLOBE program there right across the street from the White House. And that's where I met Lynn Weibels and Tom Pike and all of the beginning of GLOBE for me and my relations. John McLaughlin, you guys are all here, so it was really nice to see you. And at this point, GLOBE was still in its infancy. And they said, well, you're walking South America. We have somebody that you might want to see at the Argos Satellite Company. And I did. I went over to Argos Satellite, and they gave me a satellite transmitter, an Argos satellite transmitter. It was 2.5 kilos. That's like 5 pounds. And it took measurements. It took this humidity and temperature, and it located where I was, and it had 16 pre-coded messages so I could click. And so, number 1, walking normal. Number 2, raining. Number 3, seeing animals. Number 16 was come get me. And I used all those. I didn't want to carry it. When I got through the middle of Brazil, I got to Manaus, and I was on my way up to Bolivia, and I was like going, gosh, this thing is heavy, and you can't eat it. But kids were following me. I was one of the first GLOBE stars, and kids were following me over the world, so I lugged this thing around. And it saved my life, I should tell you. It just saved my life, because when I came down with symptoms of malaria in the Bolivian Amazon, 16. And I didn't believe it was going to work. I mean, come on. That's going to save my life. And it did. My wife, she wasn't my wife, and she was my fiance, was back in Washington, and the Argos company called her. Yes, you're on our list. Yeah, John's emergency beacon went off. What should we do? She says, I don't know what to do. They said, well, we know where he is. Call the embassy. And they called the embassy, and the embassy said, oh, you know, we get those every day. You know, somebody, American's missing down here. He'll show up in a couple of weeks. And she said, no, this is really serious. He wouldn't turn this on if it was. Well, they said, don't you know someone at the White House? And she said, yes, I do. Is she a liaison, right? Yes, Beth Walker. Well, go talk to Beth. My wife went over to Beth and said, Beth, John's emergency beacon went off. She said, should I call the embassy again? And Beth said, no, let me call. Beth called the embassy and talked to the person in charge there of search and rescue, the security person. And he said, yes, his wife or fiance called, and we told her he'll show up in a couple of weeks. And she said, well, I don't know how they're going to cover this in the Bolivian Times, but let me tell you how they're going to cover it in the Washington Post. No, it's not necessary, Miss Walker. The next day, there were two helicopters overhead. And they went over that way, and they went over that way. Finally, they came back, and one landed, and a soldier jumped out with an M16, and he ran over to me, and he says, are you the one that's lost? I says, I'm not lost, but you're taking me with you. He says, oh yeah, another helicopter landed. And that was really interesting because they were the DEA. And they had volunteered to come out and find the ambassador, Dr. Francis. Now, I had a red hat, which I usually wear on stage, but I didn't wear it. But my wife was always saying to me about this red hat, why are you wearing that silly red hat? Why do you wear that silly red Wisconsin hat? Come on, you're grown up. You don't need to wear that anymore. When they asked her, is he wearing anything that would be recognized from a helicopter, she said, yes. It's a red hat. And so when they stopped and got me, they said, oh, well, we found your red hat. We saw the red hat. That's why we knew it was you. And we only had about 5 minutes left of fuel, so I was rescued. They saved me. Everyone thought I was coming back to the United States, and that was the end of my walking. But I stayed there and recuperated and started walking again. Now that I had walked across the United States, the length of South America, I got to Buenos Aires. And there's a globe school in Buenos Aires, and they had a globe school in Antarctica. Do you want to go to Antarctica? Oh, no. Yes. Take me to Antarctica. So they flew me to the Antarctica base on the peninsula, Base Esperanza. And I was there, and I visited a globe school. Next time I'm going to bring globe pictures. Those are really great pictures of being at a globe school in Antarctica. And then I came back to Ushuaia. And when I got back to Ushuaia, I walked from Ushuaia back to Buenos Aires. And every day I got up, there's like hurricane force winds, and I'm thinking, oh, I've bitten off more than I can chew. And once I finished, my sight turned to Africa. I was going to sail to South Africa and then walk my wife stopped me, my fiance stopped me, and she said, "John, don't you think it's time we should get married and have children?" We had been dating for 10 years. "Okay, dear." And so I did. I stopped, I got married. We had 2 children, 2 boys. They're 17 and 23 now. During that time, I taught planet walking at the University of Wisconsin. So I started walking back across the United States and took my students on these walks with me. And just recently, my wife said to me, "Okay, John, if you want to go walking, if there's anything you want to do, you should go do it." And I said, "Well, I want to walk Africa." And she said, "Well, you should go do that. I'm not going to say anything about it. Whatever you want to do." And I said, How come you've changed your mind that I could just go walk like that?" She says, "John, you're getting old. You don't have much time." Well, my wife is 20 years younger than me. And so I guess when I think about it, I said, "Yeah, I guess you're right, honey." So I left and I started walking through South Africa. And thankfully, I have Mark and Rosaline, who are my dear, dear friends now, who are there, who assisted me in getting connected to Globe schools and just getting myself safely along the trail, along the path. As Mark said, with other community members, I mean, I have to tell you, I've had more help than you can imagine. And people have taken me into their home every night after a day out on a walk. People have picked me up and taken me back and fed me. It's just been an amazing time for me. I go back again in September and looking for the opportunity to engage with more students, with more Globe schools, and not just here in Africa. As Mark said, this is something all over the world. Globe is all over the world. And I'm moving slowly. My route will take me into next country, Botswana. Now, I can't wait. But also, I want to say, for all the other countries in Africa, all the other Globe countries, all the other countries in the world, because my route doesn't go through your country doesn't mean I won't come and visit you and start a walk there. So think about how we can co-create Planetwalk Globe around the world as we gather scientific, quantitative data, as we gather stories about kindness, because how kindness manifests in ourselves is how I'm here today. I realized that as I walked across America, without kindness, I would not be here. Kindness transcends those silos, those barriers, those things that we put in between us to keep us separated. And so kindness, I realized, is really an important part of who we are. In fact, I wrote a children's book that was published last year on human kindness, which has true stories of compassion and generosity that changed the world. And there are examples of kindness from all over the world and from far back as we can remember and even till we can't remember. Oh boy, I have a whole 10 minutes almost. So, like this. I'm glad you don't have to worry about that. But I'm going to I think I'm going to leave this off right now with a banjo. I'm going to play the banjo, and I'm going to ask you, I think there's going to be a workshop, a work lunch, and there's going to be paper on your table, and I want to leave you with the word that I think I want you're going to write about what you feel and how you put all this together. It's called, there are many words, and I had many words, and Simon says, no, John, just one word. Because if you many words, they won't do it. I said, no, okay, one word. So the one word, which is what we've talked about, where we are, who we are, and Planetwalk. I'm the planet walker. Thank you again. The one word is co-create. Co-create. I've learned so much from all of you. You are my teachers. I am your student. And as I learned from teaching at university without speaking, if you're not learning, you're probably not teaching either. For questions?
What was the title of your dissertation?
The title of my dissertation was Oil Spills from Ships in the Marine Environment in the United States and Caribbean, the Cost and Conventions. Thanks for that question. That was...
John, thank you. Maybe just a quick comment for reflection. I think kindness is at the center. I did a commencement address at MIT, and I told them kindness is more important than knowledge. We have an expression at the school that says mens et manus, which means mind and hands, doing. But we felt like the secret word that we also have is mind, hand, and heart. And that technology and science are really, in the end, about love. And that this network is so interesting because this is a kindness network for our planet and each other and bringing our youth along. And so I thought your word was so relevant, and it's such a co-creation network. And so I'm just going to share that when my boys, we were talking yesterday, both have 2 boys, we're in 3rd grade, their teacher had all kinds of wonderful things on the wall, but my favorite was this huge poster that said, "In effort, there is joy." And so the idea of kindness and joy through doing is such a fundamental thing, and whether it's the walking that you're doing. So just thank you for the inspiration today. And also one of my mom's best friends, Diane Clark, is visiting, who shared about the garden. She was in the Great Peace March and was the mayor of Peace City that walked across the United States in the 80s. Yeah. For global nuclear disarmament at the time, and they started picking up trash, and just anyway, so we have 2 walkers here. But any reflection on that, but I think kindness and effort through joy is what Globe is all about at the end of the day, so thank you.
Thank you very much for that reflection and that kindness and joy. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and a lot of people, I guess, have been thinking about it, particularly some people who are thinking of interstellar travel, and I guess NASA's going to have to say that, hey, they're part of that, is that we are already an interplanetary species, and interstellar travel is is something that is, the technology is going to come. And along with that technology, we have to bring ourselves and kindness together, because are we going to take what we're doing now into interstellar space, interplanetary space? If we're going to take the violence that goes on between us, there are those who feel that the technology that could come will be so amazing that we could go from star systems to star systems faster and more easily than we think. But that technology which comes through us won't come if we aren't ready to receive it, meaning if we're not ready to live as human beings living on the planet together in cooperation with each other. I have a very good friend who is an astronaut, and his name is Rusty Schweiger. And Rusty and I met in California when I wasn't riding in cars and I didn't talk. And he said to me, "Oh, so yeah, you're the guy, you don't ride in cars, you don't talk." And he kind of looked at me, and many years later, we are both members of the New York Explorers Club. We met at the New York Explorers Club Gala, and I went up to him, I said, "Rusty, you remember me?" He goes, "Yeah, you're the guy who doesn't ride in cars and doesn't talk, but you're talking now." And I said, "Yeah, but I remember Rusty when he came back from his time in space, that he was changed. And I guess he had this overview of there was no borders, no boundaries, no frames, and that we should all be living together as one, and in peace and joy and all those things. I think we have that ability to do that. So kindness, along with the technology, is, I think, necessary for us to continue on. As I say, I would not be here if it were not for human kindness.
Mine is quick and silly. What kind of shoes do you recommend?
They're very worn now. And I don't want to be because, you know, a good pair of shoes is really a good pair of shoes that fit your feet and make your feet feel good. And there are lots of them out there. And so I'm not going to tell you I wear this brand or that brand, but I'll wear, and I won't stick to one brand. I'll look for, these feel good. I'm wearing these, right.
Hello, everybody. Mine is not a question, but rather an appreciation of what we have just talked about. Your speech was so inspirational, and I was so excited to hear you talking about my country, Botswana, that you'll be walking through. I'll be glad to meet you there together with the rest of African team to take you through my country. Beyond that, I was really excited. On a different note, though, I was really excited yesterday when I touched in America for the first time in my life to come to America. When I was in my hotel room waiting for a shuttle to take me, I had a call from a certain gentleman called himself Simon. Simon surprised me more than anything. Coming to America and hearing somebody speaking to you in my vernacular language made me so much welcomed. Thank you, sir, for understanding my language, my vernacular language. Thank you, sir.
Ngose, did you had something?
Thank you, Dr. John, for your presentation, and thank you as Planetwalk. My question is about health and working. When I see my doctor, they say to me, you have to stop medication and you must work. Now, my question, does working improve your health? I think that it's a good opportunity to talk to us the relation between health and working. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I should have been doing this all along because my hearing's not so good. But does walking improve your health? Oh my. I'm not going to stop to find out. But you know, I'm 78 now, and I'll just keep walking. I'm not in a hurry. And I'll just keep walking and keep doing this and being a planet walker as long as I can. And is it improving my health? Possibly.
Doctor, thank you. Jeff, NASA, it's really great to have you here. One omission is, could you kindly introduce your banjo? Introduce your banjo.
Oh, introduce it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. My banjo is a SS Stewart. It's a made in Philadelphia around 1890. And so it's an old banjo. It's a small banjo. It's called the American Princess model. And they made them for women because they thought women couldn't play big banjos. But I came across that banjo because someone who had a music store knew that I walked a lot. And they said, here's a little banjo for you, you know, that you get to play. You can carry it. It's easy to carry around. And in Africa, they call it banjo the pan. Well, in South Africa, it's a pan. And Africans, I guess, invented the banjo and brought to America and the slave ships and all that history. And I just love how it sounds. I didn't know that. I just fell into it. I love how banjos sound. So, thank you so much.
Great, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, John. That was a wonderful keynote. John's had a film made about him, and it's brilliant. And we are going to show it tomorrow. It's actually touring film festivals right now. John would probably be far too modest to tell you that it was shown in the Telluride Film Festival and won the People's Choice, or Audience Appreciation, People's Choice Award. So we're gonna show that tomorrow at about 6 o'clock. But John is around. He's with us all week. At some point, if the weather lets up, I think we're going to follow John on a little... The campus is 2 miles, one of the room assistants told me. So I think that would be something fun to get everybody moving, and we can see what it's like to walk with John. We are back here at 1:45. So once you've had your lunch, you get a little time off. And thank you very much for a great first morning.